Ko Ahmad Ahok, ko Table Mountain Jamonga, ko Lisbeth Awak, ko Pulpok Te Waka, no Africa Te Tonga, no Reira, Tena Koutou Katua. My name is Ahmad and I'm originally from Cape Town, South Africa. I'd like to welcome you to today's gathering. And before we start, we'll just start with a karakia, with a prayer by Leanne. Somewhere on this.
E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e mihi ana ki te whenua, e tangi ki te tāmata. Ka nui te mihi ki te hinga ora, ti hei mauri ora. Nau mai, haere mai, ki te hui mai nei, mo te kaupapa i tēnei ata. Kia karakia, tūtaua mai i runga, tūtaua mai i raro, tūtaua mai i roko, tūtaua mai i waho. Kia tātou ai, te mauri tū, te mauri ora. Haumi e, hui e, tai e. Free, free! Free, free! Free, free!
Kia ora, Leanne. Before we start, we just acknowledge that we are standing on the land of the Mana Whenua, colonized land, Ngāti Whātua land, so we acknowledge that. Welcome to all of you who come here every week and to support Palestine, to support all those who are affected by the colonial settler project. It has been months now, more than a year, and we urge you to continue to come, okay? There is a temporary ceasefire, and unless there's a permanent ceasefire, we will continue to gather here. So please find out if you have anything else, we will continue to gather here every week, and every first Saturday of the month, we will have a rally and a march, okay? So please just remember that. The hostages are being freed at the moment, sir. Palestine! 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 If you encounter anyone like that, please just either give them the chance, refer them to us, or just don't do anything that could upset them any further. Because I think we are in a time where some people are really, really touchy, because things are not going their way. And the theme of this gathering, and we try to do it as a gathering, is just to raise our voice for the struggle for a free Palestine, continue the campaign until there's a current a permanent ceasefire and total relief for Gaza and for other areas, all right? And of course, the genocide hotline, which Neil will speak about later on, we will support that as well, okay? Make sure that you are safe, all right? Before, during, and after these gatherings. Right, before we listen to some music, just want to say something. This morning on the news, I felt ashamed to be a New Zealander, and there's not a lot of times when you feel that, because I think Donald Trump's attempt to target individual ICC members was met with opposition, even from the apologists for apartheid, racist apartheid, genocidal Israel, and even Germany, France, and I think the UK spoke out against Donald Trump. But again, New Zealand and Australia refused to do so. Shame! But that's all from me at the moment. We will listen to some music. Do we have music to listen? Yes, we will have Kia ora, Susan, kia ora, and I think there's some delicacies going around again. Just two things, it's been whispered in my ear. We had the gentleman over in front of me talking about hostages, and often they refer to the Israelis as hostages and Palestinians as prisoners, which means prisoners means criminals. And the gentleman over there just reminded me to speak out and say we also have hostages, not prisoners, right? We clear on that, right? Thank you. And I think that's important. Might be a small thing, but it's important. To the right of me, there are some cyclists here over here. Let's give a big welcome to the cyclists for Palestine. I think they've been doing a little bit of riding. All right, thank you everyone. Okay, our first speaker for the day will be Gentry. So I welcome Gentry to the microphone. Gentry's over here. Thank you. Let's give Gentry a big round of applause.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ina mana, ina reo, ina iwi o kumotu. Tēnā koutou katoa. And acknowledge along with Ahmed, the mana whenua, Ngāti Whātua, whose land we stand on and whose welcome we as Hauiwi were embraced and should acknowledge. Hoi ti kuriti. And Salaam Alaikum. It's important that we acknowledge today the suffering of the Palestinians, and particularly those of us who know among us who are Palestinians and whose families have been suffering for decades. While the bombs are not dropping on Gaza, we know that the West Bank, killing is going on, and dying is going on in Gaza through the effects of the war of the last 16 months. So, free Palestine! Free Palestine! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free! I'd like you to show your appreciation for local Palestinian people by giving them a shout out. They have suffered for decades of Israeli oppression. Bombardments in 70 years and the 16-month genocide. They are reclaiming their land now, but they need all the support that we can give them. Their monumental grief is palpable, but so is their resistance, so is their sumud, so is their resilience. So bravo to the Palestinians, and give them a big round of applause. So we celebrate this resistance, their determination to stay on the land. And it is customary in the Middle East, when there is a celebration to take place, that there is a ululation, and by some quirk of anatomical genetic, I can ululate. So if you can join in, do. And the way we do it is go, again. Look, we gather here today in solidarity, as we know, and it's really important to keep up this demonstration of solidarity with the indigenous peoples of Palestine. So this week we know about the grotesque, we witnessed this grotesque scene of two criminals congratulating each other about the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. Shame! Shame! It is an ethnic cleansing on a scale unseen since Nazi-occupied Europe. Trump handed Netanyahu and his criminal parliamentary colleagues a mandate to annex the West Bank and remove the Palestinians from Gaza. It's been condemned all over the world, but not in our country. Have we heard from our government? No. Have we heard from our Prime Minister? No. Have we heard from our Foreign Minister? No. But we have heard from the Green Party. Yeah. I have I agree with the Green Party that Christopher Luxon as Prime Minister must condemn the crimes against humanity and the US President's stated plans to forcibly remove the Palestinians from Gaza. Go the Greens! They say Palestinians belong to Palestine belongs to Palestinians. To force the mass displacement of people from their homeland on top of the latest 16-month genocidal assault, it's unthinkable that new infringement on human rights is happening before our eyes.
And it's setting a dangerous precedent.
Exactly, Keith. It's setting a dangerous precedent. And what do we get from the Foreign Minister? Absolutely meaningless mumblings about vague connections with... It is a shame, and we should call on him to be dumped. He is a lawyer who advocates all the time for race-based rules. What nonsense when he can't bring himself to condemn an ethnic cleansing articulated by the most powerful man on this planet. Dump dump Winston! Dump Winston! So have we heard from the Labour Party? Not yet. But we have heard from, finally, the UK Labour Party, which came up with a statement that the UK would oppose any effort to remove Palestinians in Gaza to neighbouring Arab states against their will. Well, that's halfway there. Isn't that pathetic? And where is our Labour Party? We should have them here, and if they are here, let us know. As well, the President of the United States has imposed sanctions on the staff of the ICC. As you know, dozens of countries have expressed their unwavering support for the ICC, but what have we done? We haven't heard a word. Our Prime Minister and Foreign Minister must publicly, forcibly denounce Trump's statements, and we demand that from them as ordinary citizens that believe in human rights and stand for the human rights of all people, regardless of their race, regardless of their other aspects of entitlement. So we care about justice and peace. We have witnessed how Kiwis care by the way it was mobilised in the Treaty Principles Bill when we wanted to kill the bill and demonstrate our solidarity with tangata whenua and prevent this ghastly bill by David Seymour to be, well, we know it won't be exercised, but there is a worrying other one, the Regulatory Standards Bill, which is even more sinister and which we have to mobilise. So look, let's consider we must impose sanctions on Israel for genocide, its illegal occupation and apartheid, and think about BDS, think about writing letters. There are many actions that we ourselves can take. Every one of us, small acts multiplied by millions can make the difference. So wavering between silence and open support for Israel renders the New Zealand government complicit. It's complicit in these war crimes and crimes against humanity. So good on the Green Party, and maybe they can shame the rest of the parliamentarians into demonstrating support for the Palestinians. Shame! Shame! Now look, there's one thing I want to end. I'm not actually a singer, but I love Tu Tira Mai Na Iwi. And Canon Iwi Huata, who was an Anglican priest and went to war and was a very famous on the west coast, Ngāti Parawa, I think. He actually was influenced the moral rearmament movement, and for those of us old enough, we can recall that. And their creed was hate-free, fear-free, greed-free world. And what a good idealistic aspiration that is. So let's all sing Tu Tira Mai Na Iwi, just for those people who don't understand the Māori, it means line up together, people. All of us. Stand in rows, people, just as we are today. Seek after knowledge and love of others, everyone. Think as one, act as one, all of us, Tihei Māori ora.
All right. Tahi o tori wha, te ara mai na iwi, au e tātou e. Tu te ra mai ngā iwi, au e tātou e. Whai rā te maramatanga, me te aroha i ngā iwi, ki a patapatahi, ki a kotahi rā. Tātou e, one more. Tu te ra mai ngā iwi, au e tātou e. Tu te ra mai ngā iwi, au e tātou e. Whai a te maramatanga, me te aroha i ngā iwi, ki a patapatahi, ki a kotahi rā. Tātou e, tātou e. Hia wehi!
Kia ora, Gentry, for setting us alight like that. There's some homework to do, people. The song, the words are online. Hey, before I introduce the next speaker, there's no excuse, and just to add to what Gentry said, there's no excuse for the New Zealand government not to have avenues to oppose racist, apartheid, genocidal Israel. The Hague Group from the southern hemisphere countries, they have come together to make sure that we are reminded that there should be international global justice for the genocide that is committed in Palestine and elsewhere. So there's no excuse for the New Zealand government not to find or support avenues to oppose this genocide. Our next speaker is Neil, who is the National Secretary of the PSNA, and he will give us an update on events to come, and especially, I think, the national conference.
Welcome later. So who's heard about the genocide hotline? We all have? Big controversy. Does anybody know what it's about? Has anybody heard the various pundits telling you what it's about versus what it really is about? If you have a look at the poster, what you find, it says Israeli soldiers are holidaying in New Zealand. And later on, it talks about IDF soldiers and reservists. So what we have each year, and the government has not moved, every year there are 200 working holiday permits for young Israelis to come here. The vast majority of that 200 are Israeli soldiers. So what have they been doing before they come to Aotearoa? Since 1948, they have been implementing the crime against humanity of apartheid. Don't forget this. On a day-by-day basis, they're committing crimes against humanity, and they have been since 1948. And now, in Gaza, a recognised genocide. So those young Israeli soldiers that come to Aotearoa have been either committing the crime against humanity of implementing apartheid, or they've been committing genocide. The aim, what we're looking for, is to change the government's policy. We want them to end the working holiday visa for young Israelis coming here. What do we want? End the working holiday visa. So what we did was we launched a hotline, and we have an email address. So when people see Israeli soldiers working or living or going like to Raglan to actually go to surf school and surf, where they can wash the blood of Palestinian children off their hands in the surf school. What we want is people to let us know we do not want people to approach the soldiers. They are proven to be dangerous people. They have carried out genocide. They've come here to rest and relax and still probably amped up. We have never asked anybody to approach an Israeli soldier, and remembering it's only Israeli soldiers that we're interested in. But we have the pundits. The Zionists, of course, they always do it. They take anything that's written, put lines through it, and then tell you what they are saying, and they put their words in our mouths. It's a typical game that they play. The shame in all this is the MPs who, not having actually looked at the poster or listened to the hotline, I'll give you the text of what they hear when they dial in, have gone out to say the PSNA has started a witch hunt for all Jews and all Israelis in New Zealand.
Lies!
A blatant lie. We had a message left on the hotline from Sean Plunkett. Anybody understand and know who Sean Plunkett is? Sean Plunkett, who gives a platform to people that he likes, like the Zionists. And when he invites people to come in to be interviewed, and he doesn't like what they're going to say, he talks over them. He has a game called the Gish Gallop, and the Gish Gallop where he throws so much rubbish at the person who he's trying to interview. They have no chance of replying to it. By the time they start to answer one question, there's 15 other questions that have been laid across, and he won't let them answer the question. He'll just keep on over-talking them. He rang John's home number, and I think he got Bronwyn, John's wife, and she said, your hotline is full of, or your program is full of shit, which was quite accurate. He called back, and she said, why would John want to go on your show when all you're going to do is talk over him? Now the interesting thing, I'll read out to you what's on the answer machine, because he must have read the poster. What it says, somebody rings a number, 0274 apartheid. It says, Kia ora, welcome to the Israeli Soldier Hotline. If you have information about the location of Israeli soldiers in Aotearoa, please leave a message after the tone. We are not interested in information about Israelis or members of the Jewish community in general. If your call is not specifically about Israeli soldiers, please hang up without leaving a message. Does that sound like we are looking at targeting all Jews? All Israelis? Sean Plunkett left 2 messages on the hotline where he said, this is Sean Plunkett. He listened to this message. He had to listen to it twice, and yet he went on air to say that this hotline is targeting all Jews and all Israelis. We can't sack him. He owns the platform. What we can do is tell people the truth, that he is a blatant, deliberate liar, and he provides a platform for Zionists and Israeli genocide. On top of that, people who should know better, David Seymour, Winston Peters, they should know better that David Seymour is embedded indeed with Israel. I once met him at a university clubs day, and I had a Free Palestine t-shirt on, and I went up to ask him, what is Act's position on Israel? He went off his tree in an instant. I started talking to one of his other MPs, and then he swung around to me and said, what are you doing standing here in a public place in a university? David Seymour is a racist with an anger management problem, and he proved that to me on that day.
I asked him whether he could name one right that Israelis have that Palestinians don't have, and he didn't know.
So moving on. Stephen Rainbow, the Human Rights Commissioner, he has come out to condemn this as actually about hunting down Jews and hunting down Israelis where we patently know it is not. A few years, Stephen Rainbow made a statement that there will be no two-state solution. It's over, it's not going to happen. Is this man an equal viewer of the populations? Is he someone who could represent the Palestinian community when they have an issue, when he is so pro-Israel that he is anti-Palestine, having a state in Palestine? Stephen Rainbow has made a number of other comments that they have to actually end Winston Peters when there was support, no, Murray McCully, when there was support in the UN just to recognise international law. Stephen Rainbow is condemning it and saying we must have another more pro-Israel representative. Stephen Rainbow, the Human Rights Commissioner, is a shame. And if anybody knows how he got the job, there are interviews, and then it went quiet for 4 months. He was not the person recommended to get that job. It went quiet for 4 months, and then Paul Goldsmith appointed him. There seems to be some corruption, and there's a very good question about how come Stephen Rainbow, pro-Israel, anti-Palestinian, got the job of Human Rights Commissioner in Aotearoa. So as I covered, this campaign is aimed specifically at Israeli soldiers. So when people say, you're looking at hunting down Jews, you can tell them, ring the hotline, and they will hear. It says, we don't want to know about Jews and Israelis in general. It's only about Israeli soldiers. So the long term, what were we going to do with that information when somebody rings up and says, hey, they're surfing on the beaches in Raglan? We would let our supporters in Raglan know what we want people to do is make a flyer or a poster and post it on the lamppost in the area where these young Israeli soldiers, genociders, apartheid implementers, so they understand that we are not welcoming them here in Aotearoa to wash the blood off their hands in our beaches. What we also want is people to email Winston Peters, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Erica Stanford, Minister of Immigration, Judith Collins, the Attorney General. She is a King's Counsel, She knows the law. She will know international law. She will know what New Zealand's obligations are under international law. But those three and Christopher Luxon do nothing. So what we want people to do is to write letters, email them, calling to end the working holiday visa for Israeli soldiers in Aotearoa. So that's what the game is. It's been so misrepresented. I've come here to give you a good explanation. Do we pretty much understand what it's about now? Yeah? Is there any questions that anybody would like to ask me? We can answer. There's a letter going around that we ask you to sign, and it's asking about ending the working holiday visa for young Israelis. Okay, thank you. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you, Neil. Our next speaker is speaking about an update on Waitangi and about the campaign against McDonald's at Orake is Leanne. Leanne from the Mana Whenua. Please welcome Leanne.
Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi nui for all those that have got their submissions in to the council. We have received confirmation that there will be a hearing and we will have our time to speak in opposition to McDonald's setting up or trying to establish itself in Orake. So for those of you that do want to activate and I haven't got your contact details, please come and see me afterwards. And the more people we have up there, we will activate before the hearing. Up on the site, which is at 152 Kepa Road, Orake, so it's right next door to the Z petrol station. Okay, the second thing I just want to talk about is the Treaty of Waitangi, Te Tiriti of Waitangi. So who went to the Manukau one? Did anyone go to Manukau? Put your hands up. Manukau? Kia ora. Did anyone go to Honi Waititi? Yeah, a lot of people at Honi Waititi. Did anyone go out to Point England for Ngāti Paoa? Yep. Oh, I didn't see you there. Okay, kia ora. Yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful day. So I'm not just Ngāti Whātua Ake. Māori, you know, when we were fighting, you know, what you do is you marry each other to stop fighting. So I also whakapapa over to Ngāti Paoa, which is also here in central Auckland, all the way up to Mangawhai and all the way down to Hauraki. So I was over at Point England, and it's the first time that Ngāti Paoa, who is yet to settle, actually in conjunction with council were there. So it was a wonderful day. So please, next year, if you want to come over the east side, we'd really love you to come along. I'd love to have some of our Palestinian whānau there. There was, my friend Kerry did turn up, and it's just a wonderful, chilled out day, wonderful time for the whānau, and just for us all to be together as tangata tiriti, tangata whenua, tangata Hawaii. So kia ora. Just one other thing I think we should all know is that in regards to this genocide hotline, Te Pāti Māori support it. Okay, Hone Rawiri has said on Radio Wātea that Te Pāti Māori support John Minto, they support PSNA, and they support that hotline, and they do not want Israeli soldiers here. Also, just can I suggest that you look on Facebook, there's a wonderful couple, Peter and Summer, I think his wife's name, they're the Aotearoa Liberation League, and there's a wonderful podcast that they've just recently done. And what was interesting for me is that we don't get to see the full coverage. So the media are so biased towards the Zionist footprint. It doesn't help when I think Gina Lynch's partner is associated with that party. But what was interesting is that Annette Sykes, who is one of our manawahine, lawyer, activist, human rights activist, she actually called the government out directly on the pie as to why they were not supporting the ceasefire. So this was a year ago, but it's still significant, and it shows that we have a lot of support from Māoridom and those, you know, positions of activism, and so please know that we do have your support. What's the other thing? Yeah, and so just going forward, keep coming every week. We really enjoy you coming here. We don't want to create a vacuum. We're here, we're ahika, we're going to stay ahika until this ceasefire, until we have a permanent ceasefire. So kia ora.
Kia ora, Leanne, thank you for that, and especially the part, just remember that, you're going to marry each other, eh? Yeah? Hey, we want the Mexicans here, eh? Yeah! So we've heard a lot about people say send the Mexicans home, but today we are privileged to have Green Party spokesperson Ricardo here, and I can say to Ricardo, we want the Mexicans here. So Ricardo, a few words from Ricardo.
Kia ora koutou. I just want to welcome my colleagues Lauren Shannon and Lan Pham who are joining me today, Green Party MPs. And I want to acknowledge first and foremost, thank you, all the people who have been holding the space for so many years to work towards justice, to work towards human rights. And the recent words by President Trump should be of concern to all of us, because what the US is doing is effectively giving a green light to the trampling of human rights to an extent that has not been seen before so outlandishly. And I really want to echo the words of previous speakers about the importance of centering our mahi on what we can do domestically. And right now we have a government that has refused to condemn, to even show condemnation for what Trump and Netanyahu are trying to do, which amounts to ethnic cleansing, which amounts to a breach of so many human rights laws and conventions, and would permanently displace Palestinian whānau. Let's make it incredibly clear. Palestine is for Palestinians, and there's nothing that any government can do that will change that. So in terms of tangible action that we can take, it includes putting pressure on our government to be on the right side of history, but we're also working in the Greens to make sure that we just don't have statements, but rather we have legislation and policy that we can push to implement. And this is why Lawrence has been working in the Select Committee to push our government agencies to divest from companies that are complicit in apartheid. This is why we have Chloe Sorbrick having a members bill that would create a sanctions regime to ensure that people complicit in Israel with war crimes are punished. And this is why we continue advocating for New Zealand to be on the right side of history in the international stage. Well, that's right. The elections are coming, and we have seen how politicians throughout the globe who have been silent or worse, complicit on breaches of human rights have been punished. But actually, this should not be about votes or elections. This is about livelihoods. This is about people. This is about politicians actually taking the lead for the communities, from the communities most impacted by this genocide. And actually, politicians don't need to be at the forefront and leaders on this issue, because Palestinians are at the forefront and are leaders on this issue. So for us, our mahi is to take the lead from our Palestinian whānau to ensure that the leadership is at the forefront. Finally, we must remember that all of these struggles are connected in the same way that Māori have shown us the interconnectedness of why honouring Te Tiriti is central to the fight for justice. Also, how New Zealand chooses to do trade can or otherwise put us in a place where we end up being even more complicit in human rights breaches, which is why my last call to action today is to go to the Ministry of it's Select Committee on Foreign Affairs and Trade, and to make a submission on the New Zealand and United Arab Emirates trade agreement, because New Zealand could actually be signing up to trade agreements that inflame the breaches of human rights, that give a free pass to governments that are actually complicit with breaches of human rights. And we've seen that with what's happening in Sudan and the complicity of the United Arab Emirates. And it is important that New Zealand shows leadership across the world on issues of human rights, especially the ones that ultimately give a free pass to other governments, as the US is showing us right now, to trample on the rights of so many communities. So kia kaha, keep showing up week after week. We'll be with you all the way.
Kia ora to our Green Party finalists. Give them another round of applause. I think it's important that our politicians just don't show up at election time, and these guys are coming every week or nearly every week to show us their support. Our next speaker will be Anna, and Anna will give us an update on what's happening in the next few weeks, and there's a lot happening. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Well, we have heard from some magnificent speakers, and we can see we have a lot of work to do, because our government needs to listen, and we're all trying to work together to do this at a greater speed and in more areas. So my job is to talk about the updates for the coming week. Yes, we're going to be back here with a gathering such as this next Saturday, same time. There'll be opportunities for some people to come to the open mic. It won't be all the time open mic, but it will be some open mic for those people who'd like to prepare in advance. This is, please do help. And if you're an artist or a singer, please come and see me afterwards, and we're very happy to have artists and singers come and help too. We have some volunteers coming in a month, but they're booked up at the moment. The first thing in the week, Wednesday the 12th, for those people who can make it at between 12 and 1 o'clock, we're going to be just along from the Maritime Museum. We're going to be outside MFAT with a message two things that are particular. One is no visas for the Israeli soldiers, and the other thing is demanding that the New Zealand government speak out against Trump sanctions against the International Court of Justice, of which New Zealand is one of the signatories. So that's an opportunity for those, and if you know any people who are not in work or in school, it would be great if they could come and join us there. It's a regular team. And then going to next Saturday here, but on the 16th, Sunday the 16th, it's a great opportunity to listen to a very prominent Palestinian Australian writer who writes on the occupied territories in Palestine. Her name is Samar Sabawi, and we invite you, and please invite other people, to come along and listen to what she has to say. And she's just recently published a book called Cactus Pear from My Beloved. And this is the story of her family, a Palestinian family, over the last 100 years, from when they were forced from Palestine. And last but not least, for those people who would like to go to Wellington to help in the national meeting, which is on the 22nd and 23rd, if you would like to go to that and would like billets at there or think you can help with transport, please come and see Neil. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next Saturday, if not before.
Kia ora Anna for that update. Our next final speaker will be Susan, and Susan will be reading a poem. Susan loves to inform us through poetry, and I think she's got a special poem for us today.
It's quite difficult to find uplifting poems at this time from Palestinian poets, but I have found one which has happy notes and sad notes. This poem is Will I Survive by Donya Abu Sita. She says, for me, writing is freedom and my dreams are limitless. Yes, Yara, you will survive. But what is survival? After the rubble of your house pressed on your chest for hours, after you inhaled air filled with dust, you waited. Hours felt like days. Questions swirled in your mind, unanswered. Tears and blood stained your fragile body, turning you red as sunset. You collapsed, then returned to life with the call, is there anyone alive? Next to you, Lara, just 6 years old, moaning in pain, and neither of you can speak. But survival comes, even if delayed, then shouting. There is a hand moving under the rubble. Donya's last poem was written on the 10th of October 2023. She was killed on the 20th of October by an Israeli airstrike at age 32. And this poem was called Will I Survive?
We will have a 1 minute silence to honor those who have lost their lives or suffered in Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, and all of those places where people are under the hammer of the oppressors. We ask you just 1 minute silence, please. Thank you, Fano. Thank you. Before we end off, I think Mike wants to say something, and I'm going to allow Mike to say something. And I think it's important what Mike has to say. It might seem controversial to some people. But I remember from the days of apartheid, when the freedom fighters were returning, and in South Africa's case, they were from Umkhonto Wesizwe, and people regarded them as terrorists. Many people. Nelson Mandela was regarded as a terrorist by the United States till 2008. Legally was classified as a terrorist. So I think what Mike has to say, says a lot about what the colonial settler project does, and what our media does to influence our minds.
I'm here because there's something that's been missing, I think, in the discussion about what's happened in recent weeks. What we have seen is a world historic defeat of empire and imperialism by people's resistance forces that don't have their own navy, don't have their own air force, don't have their own military forces, yet can emerge after 15 months of genocide in beautiful white Toyota Jeeps and pristine uniforms in the resistance forces, emerge from the tunnels, emerge from beneath Gaza and take over Gaza again. The resistance forces emerged, took over Gaza, took control immediately. And the ceasefire is hugely difficult for Israel to resile from, because every stage of the ceasefire, which is exactly the same ceasefire that was available 5 months ago, and even probably available immediately after the initial escape from the Gaza ghetto, this peace agreement is exactly the same as what's been available from the beginning. And it's a victory, right? They have no control of the Egyptian border. The Netherlands corridor is shut down. All of their troops are withdrawn. Now, the Hamas, there was a joint resistance. It's not just Hamas, but the Hamas person said, and I think this is really true, when he emerged, one of the commanders, he said the history of warfare will be written before Gaza and after Gaza. Right? Can you imagine? I'm a sort of a student of military history, right? And nothing compares to what they succeeded in doing, right? So you had, and there's some similarity with the tunnels in Vietnam, for example. And they had a big tunnel network in Vietnam, in many areas. They were part of the resistance. Cuba learned from that, and when Cuba felt it was going to be invaded, they started to build sort of bunkers and tunnels with a view to, because they thought the empire would be able to take over, but then a resistance would follow. And I was aware of the tunnel thing, of course, but what you had, but what I feared was the obvious, which is, what about gas? What about flooding? And Israel talked about that. But the obvious thing is, there was nothing. If they could have gassed them, they would have. If they could have flooded them, they would have. Right? But nothing they could do. And so they ended up waging war on rubble again and again and again. Imagine this, right? There's nothing left standing. So they bombed it again. They blew it up again. They did 3 invasions of the refugee camps, 4 invasions of refugee camps, blowing up rubble again and again and again. And at the end of it all, the resistance fighters emerged from the tunnels and took casualties on the Israeli side. Let's celebrate anyone's death. But they have a legal right to resist. They have a legal right to fight. They have a legal right to say no to occupation. And they were doing it until the last week of the occupation. and Israeli soldiers were dying by the dozen a week. That is why they signed the agreement. They lost. They are scared to say they lost, but they lost. And they're never going back because they know they'll never win. And Trump's not going to go in either. Not for them. So they have won. No, the fight is not over, of course, right? The desire of this genocidal state is to expel everyone. But they are starting from the back foot, and so we have to allow all of Palestine people and all over the world to fight for the liberation of Palestine, and that involves the final point. The final point. They have been propped up by the empire, not the old empire, the French, the British, the Americans, right? This is there, yes, New Zealand too. New Zealand were there, unfortunately, from the beginning, as genocidal collaborators. But the world has changed. In my view, the 500 million people of the Arab world, the 500 million, will rise up. And all of their rulers, their Hashemite monarchs or whatever imposed on them, or military dictatorships imposed on them, they will rise up and remove all of these regimes that have been serving the empire, and then Palestine will be free.
Thank you for your passion. Thank you. Just two things before I round up. The talk by Samar Sabawi is at 7 p.m. on Sunday, and it's at Western Springs Garden Community Hall, room 1. So at